The silent hum of the Novan warship's observation deck filled the air as Commander Daho repeatedly rewound and played the surveillance footage. His three-fingered hand trembled slightly as he watched the scenes unfold for the 100th time. The massive display screen cast an eerie blue glow across his gray-scaled skin, highlighting the deep worry lines etched across his face. The mission had started routinely enough. His elite scout team, the finest warriors in the Novan fleet, had descended to the surface of planet E4721 under the cover of their most advanced cloaking technology. Their orders were simple: observe the dominant species, assess their threat level, and report back. No contact, no engagement. But something had gone terribly wrong. The footage showed Lieutenant Kita's squad moving through a densely forested area. Their armor, capable of withstanding direct hits from plasma weapons, gleamed dully in the planet's weak sunlight. The warriors moved with practiced precision, their neural disruptors and plasma rifles held ready. The first sign of trouble came when Private Sunmi's bio readings suddenly spiked. The footage showed nothing unusual, just trees, undergrowth, and the sound of local wildlife. Then, without warning, a crude metal projectile punched through her armor's weak point at the neck joint. She dropped without a sound. Maintain formation. Kite's voice crackled through the recording. Activate thermal scanning. But the thermal scanner showed nothing. The primitive projectiles continued to find their marks with devastating accuracy. 2 more soldiers fell before they could even identify the direction of attack. The footage shifted to Kita's personal camera feed. The lieutenant had taken cover behind a large tree, his plasma rifle charging for a widespread burst. That's when they first saw one of the humans, a creature in crude camouflage clothing, moving with surprising speed between the trees. Kita's shot missed completely, the plasma burst dissipating harmlessly against the foliage. More humans appeared, using the terrain with a skill that spoke of intimate familiarity. They seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike, and vanish again. The Novan warriors' superior technology meant nothing against an enemy they couldn't effectively target. Commander Daho leaned forward as the recording reached the part that still gave him nightmares. Kita's squad had retreated to a river, hoping to use it as a natural barrier. The lieutenant had just finished setting up automated defense turrets when the water behind him erupted. A human soldier, having apparently lain in wait underwater for an impossible amount of time, emerged like some ancient sea creature. Before Kita could react, the human had already identified and destroyed his armor's power core with precise strikes, using nothing but a primitive blade. The commander paused the footage on Kita's final transmission. They're not primitive. They're predators. There, the rest was static. Daho slumped in his chair, his mind racing. How had it gone so wrong? The humans' technology was centuries behind the Novan empires. Their weapons were simple projectile launchers, their armor nothing more than woven fiber and plates. They hadn't even achieved reliable space travel yet, but they had done what no other species had managed in 3 centuries. They had completely decimated a Novan elite scout team. He pulled up the preliminary analysis of human physiology on a secondary screen. The readings were fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. These creatures could repair broken bones, heal from serious wounds, and adapt to almost any environment. They could regulate their body temperature, go days without sleep, and push their bodies far beyond their normal limitations through sheer force of will. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The ship's AI announced the arrival of senior researcher J1. He quickly composed himself, straightening his ceremonial uniform. "Enter," he called out, not taking his eyes off the frozen image of the human warrior emerging from the water. J1's footsteps were almost silent as she approached. "Commander, the High Council is demanding answers. They want to know how a supposedly primitive species managed to detect and eliminate our best soldiers." Daho finally turned to face her, his expression grim. "Tell them." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell them we've made a terrible mistake in our assessment. These humans aren't primitive at all. There's something far more dangerous. They're warriors who have spent their entire history fighting and adapting. And now, he gestured to the screen. Now they've learned our weaknesses too. As if to emphasize his point, he played the final moments of the footage again. The human warriors' movements were precise, efficient, and lethal, the product of countless generations of warfare and survival. We thought we were studying them, Daho said quietly. But they were studying us right back, and they learned faster than we ever could have imagined. The white walls of the high-security wing seemed to pulse with tension as senior researcher Jaiwan paced back and forth. The room was filled with the galaxy's brightest military analysts, yet no one spoke. They all stared at the massive holographic display that filled the center of the room, showing scenes that made even the most hardened warriors uncomfortable. "Play it again," Jaiwan ordered, her voice steady despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. Dr. Hansol nodded and reset the historical footage. The images flickered to life, showing thousands of years of human warfare compressed into a terrifying sequence. The assembled team watched as primitive humans fought with sticks and stones, their battles crude but deadly. Then came bronze weapons, iron swords, and increasingly complex tools of war. The speed of their weapon development was unprecedented. No other known species had advanced their killing tools so rapidly. "Stop there," Jaiwan commanded as the footage showed humans fighting in something they called World War I. "Look at this carefully. These humans are literally living in holes in the ground, surrounded by poison gas, yet they continue fighting. Any rational species would have surrendered or died out. But humans," she shook her head in disbelief, "humans adapted." Dr. Hansol stepped forward, his research tablet projecting additional data streams. What's even more fascinating is their response to defeat. When they lose a battle, they don't just learn from it. They completely revolutionize their approach. Look at this sequence. The hologram shifted to show the evolution of human aerial combat, from fragile wooden aircraft to supersonic fighters in less than a century. The advancement was astronomical. "It gets worse." A junior researcher named Yunho spoke up from the back of the room. He transmitted his findings to the main display. They turned their own worst mistakes into advantages. Every time they've nearly destroyed themselves, they've emerged stronger. Nuclear weapons, they developed precision strikes. Chemical warfare, they created better protective gear. Biological weapons, their medical science leaped forward by decades. Jaiwan watched as her team processed this information. She could see the growing unease in their expressions. These weren't just academic findings. They were looking at a species that had turned warfare into an art form. "But here's what truly sets them apart," she said, bringing up footage from their recent disastrous first contact. "Watch how these modern humans fought our scout team. They didn't just use their weapons. They used everything. The environment, the weather, their own limitations turned into advantages. They're not just warriors. They're adaptable beyond anything we've ever encountered." The room fell silent as they watched the human soldier emerge from the river, taking down Lieutenant Kita with terrifying efficiency. The scene played out again and again, each viewing revealing new details about the human's combat capabilities. "Our initial psychological analysis suggested they would break under pressure," Dr. Hansol added, his voice tight with concern. "Instead, they seem to thrive on it. They've developed something they call stress inoculation training. They deliberately put themselves through hell just to perform better in actual combat." Jaiwan nodded grimly. "And that's not even considering their cultural aspects. Look at this." She brought up images of human entertainment, movies, games, books, all centered around conflict and warfare. They turn their battles into stories. They glorify their warriors. They keep the memory of every war alive through generations. It's not just about fighting for them. It's about learning, adapting, and passing on those lessons. A young analyst raised her hand timidly. "But surely they must have some weakness, some limitation we can exploit." "That's just it," Jaiwan replied. pulling up the bio readings from their fallen scouts. Their greatest weakness is also their strength. They're incredibly diverse. No two humans fight exactly the same way. They're unpredictable, creative, and they seem to take pride in finding new ways to overcome superior forces. She walked to the center of the room, her shadow cutting through the holographic display. We need to understand something fundamental here. We're not just dealing with another warrior species. We're dealing with creatures who have spent their entire existence fighting. Against nature, against each other, against their own limitations. And they've won every time. Dr. Hansol added the final piece of data to the display. A comparison of human warfare evolution against every other known species. The difference was stark and terrifying. Where other species developed linear improvements in their military capability, humans showed exponential growth, marked by countless innovations born from desperate situations. We need to report this to the High Council immediately, Jai-1 concluded, her voice firm. These humans aren't just dangerous because of their weapons or their tactics. They're dangerous because they never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never, ever give up. The implications hung heavy in the air. The Novan Empire had conquered countless worlds, faced innumerable enemies, but they had never encountered anything like this, a species that turned warfare itself into a force for advancement. Medical Officer Su Jin's hands shook as she inputted the access code to the secure laboratory. Behind her, a team of the Empire's top xenobiologists waited in tense silence. The automated doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room filled with holographic displays of human biological data. What you're about to see, Su Jin began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands, defies everything we know about biological limitations. She activated the main display, showing footage from their recent encounters with human soldiers. The first recording showed a human continuing to fight with a severe injury to their leg. According to all known medical science, the damage should have rendered them immobile. Instead, the human not only kept moving but managed to eliminate 3 Novan soldiers before receiving medical attention. This shouldn't be possible, Su Jin explained, freezing the image. Look at their pain response indicators. She pulled up a biological readout. They're registering the pain. Their nervous system is fully functional, but they're somehow choosing to ignore it. Dr. Minho, the team's senior physiologist, leaned forward. How are they overriding their body's natural responses? Su Jin brought up a detailed scan of human biochemistry. They have this remarkable system. They call it adrenaline. But it's more than just a hormone. It's like they have an entire emergency override protocol built into their biology. The screen shifted to show a comparison between normal human vital signs and those during what they called an adrenaline rush. The differences were startling. Heart rate doubled, oxygen consumption spiked, and muscle strength increased far beyond normal parameters. But here's what's truly extraordinary, Su Jin continued, bringing up footage from their combat encounters. Watch this human soldier. They've sustained a punctured lung, yet they managed to run 2 kilometers and engage in hand-to-hand combat before seeking treatment. The assembled scientists watched in stunned silence as the footage played out. The human's life signs should have been failing, but instead, they seemed to grow stronger as the situation became more desperate. They have redundant systems we've never seen before, Su Jin explained, highlighting various aspects of human anatomy. They can function with 1 lung, 1 kidney, even with significant damage to their liver or spleen. It's as if they evolved expecting to fight while injured. A junior researcher raised her hand. Could this be artificial enhancement? Su Jin shook her head. That's the most frightening part. This is their natural state. They evolved on a high-gravity world with countless predators and environmental challenges. Their bodies aren't just capable of handling extreme stress. They're designed for it. She brought up new footage, this time showing human training exercises. Look at how they deliberately push themselves to the point of exhaustion, then keep going. They call it pushing through the wall. They train their bodies to ignore their own biological warning systems. The room fell silent as they watched humans performing what they called endurance training, running until they collapsed, then getting up and running more, swimming in freezing water, surviving in scorching deserts. Their temperature regulation is unlike anything we've seen, Sujin continued. They can survive in environments that would kill most species. They sweat to cool themselves, actually secrete water through their skin. It's incredibly inefficient, but it means they can keep fighting long after other species would have overheated. She pulled up one final piece of footage, the most disturbing of all. A human soldier, severely wounded, creating a makeshift tourniquet from their own clothing. They understand their biology so well that they can perform emergency medical procedures on themselves, while under fire, using whatever materials they have available. Dr. Minho sat back, his expression grave. You're saying they're not just warriors, they're biological tanks. Sujin nodded. Their entire evolution seems to have prepared them for warfare. They can heal from injuries that would be fatal to other species. Their bones knit back together stronger than before. They can even regenerate damaged tissue to some extent. She brought up a final display showing human recovery rates. And perhaps most importantly, they can keep fighting even when their bodies are telling them to stop. It's as if their survival instinct actually makes them more dangerous instead of triggering a retreat response. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. They weren't just dealing with determined warriors. They were facing beings whose very biology made them nearly impossible to stop through conventional means. In all my years studying alien species, Sujin concluded, I've never seen anything like this. They're not just resistant to damage. They seem to become stronger through it. Every injury they survive teaches them something new. Every limit we think they have, they find a way to push past it. The room remained silent as the scientists processed this information. They had come expecting to find weaknesses in human physiology. Instead, they had discovered a species that seemed purpose-built for warfare, with biological capabilities that bordered on the impossible. Intelligence analyst Minki stood before the Novan High Council, his usually crisp uniform damp with sweat. The chamber's dark stone walls seemed to close in around him as he prepared to share his findings. The council members watched him with their characteristic unblinking stares, their gray scales reflecting the dim light. Distinguished council members, he began, activating the holographic display. What I'm about to show you goes beyond physical combat capabilities. These humans, he paused, collecting himself, they've turned warfare into a form of psychological art. The first recording filled the chamber, night vision footage from a Novan patrol. The soldiers moved through what appeared to be an abandoned human military facility. Everything seemed quiet until strange sounds began echoing through the corridors. Whispers, footsteps, and sounds that made no logical sense. Watch what happens to our warriors' vital signs. Minki pointed to the data stream. The Novan soldiers' stress levels were spiking, their combat effectiveness dropping rapidly. The humans weren't even there yet. They were using the building's acoustic properties to create fear. One of the council members leaned forward. Are you suggesting they weaponized fear itself? Minki nodded grimly. These humans have developed something they call psychological warfare. They don't just try to defeat their enemies. They break their will to fight. He switched to another recording, this one from a forest operation. Look at how they use darkness. The footage showed Novan warriors, equipped with advanced night vision, moving through dense vegetation. Suddenly, bright flashes appeared, temporarily blinding their sensitive optical systems. In the confusion, human soldiers struck from multiple directions, using the Novan's own technology against them. They study their enemies, Minki explained. They learn our weaknesses, our fears, our technological limitations. Then they exploit them in ways we never considered possible. He brought up another recording, this one particularly disturbing. A single human had managed to terrify an entire Novan squad by using nothing but sound and shadow manipulation. The squad, despite their superior training and equipment, had become so disoriented they started firing at each other. But here's what truly sets them apart. Min-Ki continued, his voice growing more urgent. They can somehow maintain their own psychological stability while inducing complete breakdown in their enemies. He displayed brain-wave patterns from both human and Novan soldiers during combat. Look at this. While our warriors show increasing stress and fear, the humans show focused aggression and calculated responses. The council chamber filled with murmurs of concern as Min-Ki played more footage. Humans using environmental manipulation to create illusions, using their knowledge of Novan biology to trigger panic responses, even turning the natural world into a weapon of terror. They have training programs specifically designed to resist psychological pressure, he explained, showing scenes from human military exercises. They deliberately expose themselves to their own fears, learn to function under extreme stress, and develop what they call mental toughness. One particularly disturbing recording showed a group of human soldiers laughing and joking while setting up elaborate traps. They can find humor in warfare, Min-Ki noted, his voice filled with disbelief. They turn their darkest moments into something they call gallows humor. It seems to make them even more resilient. The council watched in silence as Min-Ki presented case after case of human psychological warfare techniques. They saw humans using simple tools to create complex deceptions, turning their enemies' superior technology into a disadvantage, and maintaining morale in situations that should have broken their spirits. Their historical records show thousands of years of developing these techniques. Min-Ki continued. They've learned to fight not just with their bodies and weapons, but with their minds. They understand fear, both their own and their enemies, and they've mastered its use as a weapon. He brought up one final recording, a captured human soldier being interrogated. Despite severe physical stress, the human maintained not just resistance, but a kind of defiant humor that unnerved their interrogators. They have sayings, Min-Ki explained. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Fear is the mind killer. These aren't just words to them. They're fundamental principles they live by. They don't just endure psychological pressure. They learn from it, adapt to it, and grow stronger because of it. The council chamber fell into a heavy silence as the implications sank in. They weren't just facing physically capable warriors. They were dealing with beings who had turned the very concept of warfare into a psychological art form. In conclusion, Min-Ki said, his voice now steady with the gravity of his report, we cannot approach conflict with humans as we have with other species. They don't just fight with weapons and tactics, they fight with their minds, and they've been perfecting this art for their entire existence. The recording ended with a final scene. A small group of human soldiers had managed to make a Novan battalion retreat simply by creating the illusion of a much larger force. They had used nothing but sound, shadow, and their understanding of Novan psychology. They don't just break bodies, Min-Ki concluded solemnly. They break minds, and they do it with a precision that suggests they understand warfare on a level we never imagined possible. Security Chief Taeyong stared through the reinforced observation window at the devastation before him. The containment wing, once the pride of Novan military security, now looked like a war zone. 3 empty cells stood open, their supposedly unbreakable locks reduced to useless scrap. Blood, both human and Novan, stained the polished floors. Play the security footage again, he ordered, his voice hoarse from hours of emergency briefings. The facility's AI complied, projecting the sequence of events onto the main screen. The recording started 18 hours earlier. 3 human prisoners sat quietly in their separate cells, appearing docile and defeated. They had been captured during the recent scout mission disaster, and the Novans had taken every precaution. The cells were equipped with energy barriers, neural dampeners, and physical restraints rated to hold creatures 3 times stronger than humans. The first sign of trouble came during the evening meal service. The humans had been acting completely normal, even submissive. They ate their meals slowly, seemingly resigned to their captivity. Nothing in their behavior triggered the facility's advanced psychological monitoring systems. "Stop there," Tai Young commanded, pointing to the first human's movements. "Look at how they're eating. They're not just consuming food. They're studying the trays, testing the material's strength with each bite." The footage continued. Over the next few hours, the humans began what appeared to be exercise routines in their cells. The guards had allowed this, seeing it as a harmless way for the prisoners to pass time. What they didn't realize was that the humans were systematically testing the reach of the motion sensors, mapping the cell's blind spots. They used the water from their drinking rations to test the energy barrier's fluctuation patterns. Tai Young explained to the investigation team. Every movement, every action was part of their plan. They weren't just passing time, they were gathering intelligence. The escape itself was a masterpiece of improvisation. The first human used their clothing, dampened with drinking water, to short out the neural dampeners. The second had slowly weakened their food tray by repeatedly flexing it while exercising, turning it into a crude but effective cutting tool. The third had been collecting small amounts of cleaning solution when the guards sanitized the cells, creating a caustic substance that weakened the physical restraints. They coordinated without speaking. Tai Young noted, his professional admiration mixing with horror. They developed a communication system using routine movements, stretches, exercises, even the way they paced their cells. We thought they were displaying stress behaviors. They were actually planning. The footage showed the moment of escape. All three humans moved simultaneously, their timing perfect. The first one shorted out not just their own neural dampener, but the entire cell block's power grid. The second used their weaponized food tray to disable the backup mechanical locks. The third had created enough acidic solution to weaken the reinforced door hinges. What happened next demonstrates why humans are so dangerous, Tai Young continued, advancing the footage. The escaped prisoners moved through the facility with terrifying efficiency. They used their own restraints as weapons, turning the very tools of their captivity against their captors. Every object they encountered became a potential weapon or tool. The guards had found themselves facing prisoners who turned cleaning supplies into smoke bombs, medical equipment into improvised weapons, and even used the facility's own security protocols to trap and isolate guard teams. "Look at how they used the environment," Tai Young pointed out. The humans had quickly understood the facility's layout, using air ducts for movement, maintenance corridors for ambush points, and even the facility's waste disposal system to move between levels. 4 guard posts fell before the facility could mount an effective response. The humans had somehow known exactly where to strike, how to disable communications, and how to create maximum chaos with minimal resources. They didn't just escape their cells, Tai Young explained, his voice grim. They launched a coordinated military operation using nothing but improvised weapons and their environment. Every piece of technology we used to contain them, they turned into a tool for their escape. The footage showed the final confrontation in the facility's lower levels. The humans had been cornered, but even then, they didn't surrender. Instead, they used their knowledge of Novan physiology, learned just from observing their guards, to target weak points and pressure sensors. We'd finally recaptured them, Tai Young concluded, but the cost was enormous. 17 guards injured, 4 critically. Every security system between their cells and the lower levels was compromised. And most importantly, they'd proved that no containment system we designed can truly hold them. He turned off the footage, facing the investigation team directly. These humans, they don't think like other prisoners. Every moment of their captivity was spent learning, adapting, planning. They turned everything into a weapon, not just physical objects, but information, patterns, routines. They weaponized their environment itself. The investigation team sat in stunned silence as Tai Young brought up the damage assessment. The escaped humans had caused more destruction with improvised weapons than most species could achieve with military-grade equipment. "My final recommendation," Tai Young stated firmly, "is that we abandon any attempt to contain human prisoners. They're too adaptable, too resourceful. Given enough time, they will find a way to turn any containment system against itself. He looked once more at the empty cells, now being repaired by maintenance droids. They don't just break out of prisons, he said quietly. They make you realize that everything you built to contain them can be turned into a tool for their freedom. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying thing about them. The Grand Council chamber fell into absolute silence as High Commander Jinwu walked to the central platform. His footsteps echoed against the ancient stone walls, each step heavy with the weight of what he was about to present. The gathered leaders of the Galactic Military Council watched him with growing unease. They had never seen the usually composed commander look so troubled. "Honored council members," Jinwu began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "What I am about to share will fundamentally change how we view warfare in this galaxy." He activated the holographic display, filling the chamber with images that made even the most seasoned warriors shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We have categorized every known intelligent species based on their combat capabilities," he continued, showing a familiar classification chart. "But humans," he paused, bringing up footage from their recent encounters. "Humans don't fit anywhere in our existing system." The first recording showed a human soldier fighting hand-to-hand with a Novan warrior twice their size. Despite the obvious physical disadvantage, the human moved with deadly precision, targeting weak points that should have been unknown to them. Their ability to analyze and exploit weaknesses is unprecedented, Jinwu explained. They don't just learn from combat. They seem to thrive on it. Each engagement makes them more dangerous, not less. He switched to footage from the laboratory incident. The council members watched in growing horror as 3 humans, armed with nothing but improvised weapons, systematically disabled an entire security system designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous creatures. "This is not just about physical combat," Jinwu emphasized. "Their minds are weapons in themselves. They can turn any environment, any situation, any object into a tool for warfare. We've never encountered a species that can improvise so effectively." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as Jinwu played more footage. Humans fighting in extreme environments, adapting to impossible situations, turning their own injuries into tactical advantages. Each new scene seemed to defy conventional military logic. "But what truly sets them apart," Jinwu continued, his voice cutting through the whispers, "is their psychological resilience. Look at this." He showed recordings of human soldiers maintaining combat effectiveness under conditions that would break most species' minds. One council member stood up, their scales reflecting the holographic light. "Are you suggesting we cannot contain them?" Jinwu's response was immediate. "I'm suggesting that attempting to contain them only makes them stronger. Every measure we take against them becomes a lesson they learn, a weakness they exploit, a new capability they develop." He brought up the medical data next, showing how humans could continue fighting with injuries that should have been fatal. Their biology itself defies our understanding of warfare. They have redundant systems, healing capabilities, and stress responses that seem designed for combat. The council chamber grew tenser as Jinwu presented case after case of human combat innovations. They watched humans turn simple tools into deadly weapons, basic materials into complex traps, and their own fear into a weapon against their enemies. "Most species," Jinwu explained, "evolve to avoid conflict. Humans have evolved to master it. They don't just survive warfare, they learn from it, adapt through it, grow stronger because of it." He showed footage of human training exercises where they deliberately pushed themselves beyond normal limits. They train not just their bodies, but their minds to handle combat stress. They have sayings like, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," and they actually live by this principle. The council's concern turned to alarm as Jinwu presented his final analysis. "We must classify humans as apex predators of the highest order," he declared. "But even that classification fails to capture their true nature. They are not just predators. They are warriors who have turned warfare itself into an art form." He brought up one last piece of footage, a compilation showing humans using everything from advanced technology to simple sticks as weapons, adapting to every situation, overcoming every obstacle placed in their path. My recommendation, Jin Woo concluded, his voice grave, is that we create an entirely new classification for humans. They are beyond apex predators. They are combat evolutionaries, beings who have turned the very concept of warfare into a path for advancement. The council chamber erupted in debate, but Jin Woo stood firm. We cannot approach conflict with humans as we have with other species. They don't just fight to survive. They fight to learn, to adapt, to become stronger. And every engagement with them only serves to make them more formidable. As the council members argued among themselves, Jin Woo added one final chilling observation, and perhaps most importantly, they seem to enjoy it. They find satisfaction in overcoming challenges, in pushing their limits and proving themselves against superior forces. They don't just accept warfare, they embrace it as a fundamental part of their existence. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just facing another warrior species. They were dealing with beings who had turned warfare itself into a force for evolution, both physical and psychological. The massive command center of the Novan flagship hummed with tension as Grand Admiral Hai Jin surveyed the assembled fleet commanders. The holographic displays showed thousands of warships positioned throughout their sector, representing the mightiest armada ever assembled in the Empire's history. Yet there was fear in the room, not of the fleet's power, but of a single species from a seemingly insignificant blue planet. You have all reviewed the reports. Hai Jin began, her voice carrying the weight of command that had earned her position. You've seen the footage, read the analyses, studied the combat data. But none of that truly captures what we're facing. She activated the central display, showing Earth floating in the darkness of space. Such a small planet, yet it had produced something unprecedented in galactic history. We lost our finest scout team to them, she continued, bringing up the footage that had started it all. We thought that was a fluke. We were wrong. Every encounter since then has only proven one thing. Humans don't just fight wars. They evolve through them. The display shifted to show various human conflicts throughout their history, from crude clubs to nuclear weapons, from simple tactics to complex strategies that seem to defy logic itself. Look at their pattern of advancement, Hai Jin pointed out. Every major conflict in their history has led to massive technological and tactical leaps. They don't just recover from wars. They emerge stronger, smarter, more capable. She brought up the laboratory incident footage, showing how 3 humans had nearly escaped their most secure facility using nothing but common items. This isn't just about their combat capabilities. It's about their fundamental nature. They transform everything, even failure, into an advantage. The Admiral walked among her commanders, letting them see the concern in her eyes. We've conquered thousands of worlds. We've faced countless species. But humans, she paused, bringing up their psychological warfare data. Humans are different. They don't break under pressure. They become stronger. They don't fear defeat. They learn from it. The display showed scenes from human history where devastating defeats had led to unprecedented victories. Wars that should have ended civilizations instead sparked revolutions in technology, strategy, and warfare itself. Effective immediately, Hai Jin declared, her voice firm. Earth and its human inhabitants are classified as a do-not-engage species. This is not a suggestion. This is not a guideline. This is an absolute command. She brought up the final analysis from their research teams. Any conflict with humans carries an unacceptable risk, not because we might lose the initial battle, but because every engagement makes them more dangerous. They study their defeats. They adapt. They evolve. The command center fell silent as she showed footage of human training exercises. Look at how they prepare for war. They deliberately put themselves through hell just to become stronger. They simulate defeats just to learn how to overcome them. What kind of species does that? One of the fleet commanders stood up. But surely our technological advantage is meaningless. Hai-Jin cut him off. They went from primitive flight to space travel in less than a century. They developed nuclear weapons after seeing their cities destroyed by conventional bombs. Every time they face superior technology, they don't just learn to counter it. They learn to improve upon it. She brought up one final display, a projection of human technological advancement if they continued at their current rate. The data was terrifying. We must accept a hard truth, she continued. We cannot defeat humans through conventional warfare. Every loss makes them stronger. Every setback teaches them something new. They have turned defeat itself into a weapon. The admiral looked at each of her commanders in turn. Let them stay in their sector of space. Let them fight their own battles, develop at their own pace. Because if we engage them, if we give them reason to turn their full attention to interstellar warfare, we may not survive the lesson we teach them. The command center remained silent as Hai-Jin delivered her final warning. In all our history of galactic conquest, we have never retreated from a species. But humans, she paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in. Humans force us to recognize our own limitations. They are not just warriors. They are beings who have turned warfare itself into a path of evolution. She closed the displays, leaving only the image of Earth floating in space. Let them remain in their sector, and pray they never decide to venture beyond it. Because if they do, she left the thought unfinished. But every commander in the room understood. The meeting ended with a new order being transmitted throughout the Novan Empire. Earth was to be avoided at all costs, not because of what humans were, but because of what they could become. In the face of a species that turned defeat into strength, even the mighty Novan Empire had to admit that sometimes the only winning move was not to play at all.